How's it going, everybody? Ryan Devlin here. Today I want to share some concepts that will help you never get lost in the chord changes again. If you've ever been mid-solo and suddenly realize you don't know where you are in the form, you're not alone. It happens to a lot of players, even advanced ones. I can say personally, this happens to me more than I would like. The key is developing strategies that anchor you to the harmony so that you can feel confident and connected no matter what tune you're playing. One of the biggest reasons a lot of players lose their place in the form is because they rely too heavily on muscle memory instead of truly hearing the harmony. To stay locked in, you need to train your ears and hands around 4 essential concepts. Hearing the harmonic devices that make up the progression and tonality of a tune, mastering the chord tones of that tune so that you feel deep-rooted in the harmony, also using chord scales to help expand that diatonic vocabulary, and applying approach tones to create forward momentum in your lines. Together, these skills will help you feel more connected to the changes so that you always know where you are. Everything that we discussed today is going to come from 2 of Chad Lefkowitz-Brown's resources here at Jazz Lesson Videos: 4 tune learning exercises and standard analysis. These books give play-along tracks and etudes that get you practicing real standards, helping you internalize and memorize the chord changes, the form, and the melodies of these well-known, commonly played tunes. If you'd like to check out these resources, you can click that link in the description and use code CHANGES5 for $5 off your purchase. Now let's get into our first concept. So concept number 1 is going to be hearing harmonic devices and associating those harmonic devices with things that you can play on your instrument. When I began my undergraduate degree at the University of Central Florida, go Knights, I felt confident navigating chord changes on my saxophone, but I truly didn't understand what I was playing and why it worked. Harmonic progressions were super unfamiliar to me. I had really great relative pitch because I was transcribing saxophone players, but when I would listen to the rhythm section, I really couldn't associate chord changes and scales with things to play on my saxophone. And my lack of ear training showed up because I failed my first 2 ear training exams during my undergrad. It was at that point that I decided to really start working on my ear training to associate progressions with things that I already knew on my saxophone. This is what brings us to our first concept, hearing harmonic devices. And you might be asking yourself, okay, ear training, I transcribe, how else do I practice this? Well, there's a simple trick that comes from our standard analysis resource at Jazz Lesson Videos. Let's take a look at the harmonic analysis of Donna Lee. So as you can see here in our PDF, we have an analysis harmonically of the chord progressions to Donna Lee. We have a key center, which is B flat for me on tenor, and we have sections of this where it changes keys, like where we have new 1 chords. For instance, at the beginning of the B section, we go to E flat major. Then the second A section, we have this minor tonality where we're kind of going to our relative minor key of G minor. That's our new 1 chord. But having these Roman numeral analysis, it's good when you're practicing and looking at this with our chord tones, so you're associating the movement of the tune with the tonalities of these chord changes. So a great way to practice this is with a backing track, just looking at our PDF here and seeing the chord changes go by as we're listening to it. Also, practicing your chord tones with this exercise. So just 1, 3, 5, and 7 with a backing track, looking at this harmonic analysis, and again, trying to associate the sound of these chords with what you're looking at on the page and what you're hearing on the backing track. So for me, what I was doing when my ear training was really bad is I would watch the chord changes go by, listening to a backing track or a recording, and turn away and see how much I could hear and associate these progressions, specifically the parts that change key. So when we go to the 4 chord, trying to listen for the 2, 5, 1 going to E flat major here. Then trying to hear the minor tonality shift. Okay, I know that we're in B flat and the relative minor is G minor, but can I hear that progression change? And looping this, repetition is key. Our ears are a muscle. So just like if you were repping in the gym, curling your biceps, the more that you do it consistently every day is going to be better than just doing 8 hours on the weekend. So I would do 10 minutes of ear training a day where I'm consistently trying to hear the different progressions on tunes like this. 10 minutes every day. The first 2 minutes, I would say, was just listening to the backing track or a recording while looking at harmonic analysis pages like this, and then playing my chord tones along with the backing track while looking at the harmonic analysis, and then turning around and seeing how I could hear the chord progressions changing. It's just an ear training exercise that you're associating hearing the chord changes with the notes on your horn. This now brings us to concept number 2, which is practicing your chord tones. We're going to focus on outlining our chords with our 1, 3, 5, 7, and sometimes 9. These tones help guide you through the harmony and helps associate the chord changes with notes on your instrument. My favorite way to practice this is pretending I'm a bass player. Let's check out one of the exercises from our 4-tune learning exercises resource. This is again over the standard Donna Lee. Now, chord tones can sometimes seem like very basic and foundational. I remember when I was studying with Chad and he would tell me to practice this way, I really overlooked it at first. But practicing walking a bass line alongside these etudes really helps me know the tune inside and out, to where I don't feel like I have to ever think about the changes. I can just improvise over them freely. So let's take a listen to this etude. So as you can hear, these are arpeggio exercises over Donna Lee. What I like to add is the bass player rhythmic phrasing of an exercise like this. So playing a little bit off the page. So after playing just the arpeggios that we have written in the book, here's an example of me adding some bass player rhythms while still only using the 4 notes of my chord. So I'm sort of improvising with these chord tones in the style of a bass player and always hitting a chord tone on the downbeat. That is really a bookmark in how to hear these changes and feel more grounded in the harmony. Even just chunking 4 to 8 bars of this tune over and over again, just improvising and playing the bass line of the chord tones will really help associate the sound of these progressions with notes on your instrument, which is exactly the point of this resource and this video. Now let's move on to concept number 3. Concept number 3 is going to be about chord scales. This is the next step after mastering our chord tones. So let's look at our second etude on Donna Lee from our resource. This is only using our diatonic chord scales. On major chords, we're using our major scale. On dominant chords, we're using our Mixolydian bebop scale. And on minor chords, we're using Dorian minor. Now, I will say sometimes melodic minor can be used diatonically, but for the most part, we're sticking with Dorian minor. Let's take a listen to our chord scale etude on Donna Lee. So this is a little bit more of a complicated version of what we did in our second concept, improvising with our chord tones. We're just adding new diatonic notes to diatonically voice lead from one chord to the next. And what's cool about Donna Lee is that there's some common progressions like 2-5-1s and 3-6-2-5-1s, but there's also some uncommon progressions like our first 4 bars, major to 6 dominant to 2 dominant. Doesn't happen that much. That is way less common of a progression in this music. So being able to navigate these diatonically is the best way of feeling grounded in the harmony. And again, we're associating more notes diatonically with our chords so that when the rhythm section is playing these progressions, you can hear these scales. So using the same process that we did in concept number 2, we're going to rinse and repeat these progressions with our chord scales and improvising our own version of this etude with a backing track. So I'm going to play the first 8 bars of Donna Lee exactly as this etude is written. I'm going to repeat the 8 bars and play my version of this etude, sticking completely diatonic to all of my chord scales, but improvising with my own take on it. A cool tip to use is to pick a rhythm that you keep consistent. I like using other melodies. One of my favorites is Yardbird Suite by Charlie Parker. The rhythm would be ba 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 be ba 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 be da, a 2-bar rhythm. And I'll stay diatonic to my chord scales, but I'm going to play that rhythm over and over again. So here's 3 different 8-bar phrases. The first 8 bars I'm going to play is going to be exactly our Donna Lee etude by Chad. The second is going to be me improvising with a consistent rhythm over the 8 bars. So I'm going to choose Yardbird Suite. And the third example is going to be improvising freely, but everything is going to be inside of my key. I'm only going to be using my diatonic chord scales like we have in our etude here. Take a listen. All right, let's move on to concept number 4 now. Concept number 4 is going to be on approach tones. One of the most powerful ways that you can stay connected while adding some tension and release is approach tones. Approach tones can be diatonic or non-diatonic. So what is an approach tone? Simply, it is a note that leads us from one chord to the next, or one non-chord tone to a chord tone. For example, if we look at our resource, sticking with Donna Lee here, let's look at our first 4 bars. B flat major, G7, C7. Here in our etude, we have chord tones on our downbeats. 1, 3, 3, 1, 3, 5, 3, 7. That's where our target tones are for the first 4 bars. And then in between, we have these 2-note approach notes, almost enclosure phrases. I'll talk about the difference in a second. So E flat to C sharp to D. C sharp and E flat are, E flat is a scale tone, a diatonic scale tone. C sharp is not, that's our approach tone, that approaches to D. Then we have C natural, B flat to B. That is a diatonic approach tone because C and B flat are in the scale of B flat major. But we're targeting our next chord tone of our next chord, which is the third of G7, B natural. That is our target tone. That's inside G7. Then we have A flat to F sharp to G. That's 2 non-diatonic tones, creating an enclosure. Enclosures are basically approach tones that go one above, one below, or one below and one above, creating a circle, encircling or enclosing a chord tone. So A flat to F sharp to G, that would be a enclosure phrase or a 2-note approach tone phrase to our root. Then we have F to E flat to E, right? That is a half diatonic, half non-diatonic approach tone because F natural is in G7, E flat is not, targets E. Then F to F sharp to G, again, half and half. F is in the key, F sharp is not. These are target tone. Then F to D sharp to E, again, half and half. And then C to B natural to B flat, half and half again. D natural to C sharp, and then C, and then the etude continues. So analyzing it and seeing where our chord tones are is the most important part of these approach tone exercises. The chord tones are the key. Everything else is just helping us get to a chord tone. That's all an approach tone is. It's approaching a target tone or a chord tone. So we're going to rinse and repeat the same process that we did for our previous 3 sections. I'm going to play the 8 bars of this approach tone exercise verbatim from the book. And the second time through, I'm going to create my own approach tones. Still keeping my 1, 3, 5, and 7 as my target tones, I'm just going to make my own 2-note approach tones. So I'm going to keep the same rhythm, ba, be, ba, da, be, ba, da, be, ba, da, but I'm going to choose my own notes to resolve to and my own notes to approach with, improvising with this vocabulary. Let's take a listen. So inside of our resource, you'll find etudes that demonstrate how to use these approach tones over all different kinds of standards. Practicing these will give you automatic ways to connect ideas, so you're always outlining changes clearly in a musical way. All right, everyone, that concludes today's video. I really hope you found these strategies helpful, and I hope you can apply these to your next practice session and next performance. If you'd like to dive deeper into this information, you can click the link in the description below to download those 2 resources we mentioned: 4 tune learning exercises and Standard Analysis by Chad Lefkowitz-Brown. And remember to use code CHANGES5 for $5 off your purchase. Happy practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.